And my dad just told him, he says, I didn't know I could buy the president that cheap. He didn't get the money. I will let you know that our government is that way today. We have the best government money can buy. And politics is two words. Poly means many, ticks are bloodsuckers. Remember this. And everything I've lived in my experience, so you're going to know what's happening. On Monday when I said no, to me, I'm starting my construction. I was, building a hotel down in Phoenix and one in Grand Island, Nebraska, and I built all the village and pancake houses throughout the United States, if you're familiar with them. I owned them. I leased them back to the company. That's another game. What happened at that minute, or that week, changed my whole life. On Friday, my lead bank, which Bill Clark's the senior vice president at the Central Bank in Denver, called me on the phone. He said, George, what did you do? I said, what are you talking about? He said, we've been doing business a long time, but the guys upstairs don't like you anymore. I said, what does that mean? He says, get down to my office. So I come down there and he says, I hate to tell you, but you're no longer considered, quote, creditworthy. And he says, I'm calling your loans. I said, okay. I said, how much time do I have to pay? And he says, well, we've been doing business a long time, 30 days. Every bank I was doing business with the next 30 days, I'd all call my loans everywhere. I mean, I was personally non-gratis. I was no longer in the inner group. And I was doing all this good stuff, right? Anyway, setting up to the next step after that, I'm saying, well, how am I know what these guys are doing. Now, at that time, I had a house in Beverly Hills. And the first thing I was going to do, I said, I'm going to expose these guys. So I flew back and I talked to my good friend, one of the major television producers, 17 years with CBS. I mean, he ran the department. And I said, we're going to make a movie to expose what's going on in Washington. Sounded like a good idea to me, anyway. He says, wake up, kid, who controls the motion picture industry? I said, okay, we got to have another way. I'm always thinking of other ways, you understand? So he says, well, I've got another deal. He says, I'm trying to start a new thing. This is the beginning of the video business. You guys all remember how it came out with the VHS and the HF tape? Well, my buddy Alan says, I'll tell you what I need to do. He says, I've got all the credentials. Let's make a 2-hour video magazine. Sounds like good to me. And we're going to put it at the checkout stand in every store in the United States. And in that 2-hour news deal, if you're going to look at it, will be little snippets to bring out the truth. I thought that was a good deal. Now, the problem is we need a video manufacturer that could take it and go along with this project. So I called a couple of my friends, and I ended up with a company small company up here called Kodak. Kodak and we had all the agreements and everything set up. They checked us all out. Everything was cool, right? They didn't know what the content was going to be. I was leaving that in the hands of my buddy Alan. At any rate, that went along real well because, as you remember, the picture business for Kodak has gone down the tubes because of the tapes, and Kodak decided to go in the VHS tape business for a while. And so what we thought, we could sell the magazine for $2 at the checkout stand, which was the price of blank tape. Now that makes a bit more sense, doesn't it? And what the distribution then was everywhere that Kodak was sold. And where would we make the money? On the advertising on the inside. So we had everything. It was a win-win thing for everybody. And I was all happy about it. Well, it all came down to, I was grabbing a plane to fly up here to New York, or up, to Rochester. And the day before, Kodak had a special meeting, and the guys upstairs decided to, and I'm talking about the other ones, got to them, and they shut down the whole project, and Kodak went out of the videotape business. So you can give you an idea how much control they have. I also, because of the Ted Kennedy thing, I decided I was going to do that. I received a document called, it was on the Gemstone files, that basically exposed all the Kennedy clan. So I ended up putting that together. I made a mistake, sent the documents to the Library of Congress for documentation. That's all the pictures and everything else. I mean, you can see it. Then I got notification from New York, some of the major publishing houses. I formed a publishing company. That was the only way I could do anything. That Jacqueline and Kimberly had given notice to all the distributors not to take my book because a lot of stuff was in there exposing what she was doing. So as a whistleblower, so to speak, that's okay. Well, I kept looking at other things, and I said, now, I sat in an office. I went in with Dick Lamb, who happened to be the governor of Colorado. I'm sitting in the Oval Office, and he says, you really made a mess of things. He says, a good thing I got my ticket. And I said, ticket? What ticket? And he says, well, if you did the bidding, you would have got one of the tickets. And at that point, they laid out what they called the Plan 2000. The Plan 2000, which Jimmy Carter, by the way, signed into action. Every senator and congressman got it, but as you probably are well aware, none of them read any of the documents they got. They don't. I think Ron Paul and John Conyers are the only two ones that admit to reading all the bills that are submitted. Otherwise, it's done by their flunkies. Anyway, what happened at that next venture, as I'm sitting here looking at this particular sequence of events, was, what is the Plan 2000? What does that have to do with you and me? Now, talking in the meetings, and I sit in on meetings, guys, before this all happened when I was a good guy. There's a problem today on the planet. You're all familiar with it. It's called population. There's 6.3 billion people on this planet right now. I was just in Washington, D.C. yesterday and the day before. I was down at the Population Center of the World Watch Organization. I have some flyers out on my desk so you know. We're increasing the population right now over deaths by 230,000 people a day, or 2,300,000. We have 1/3 of the population on the planet, 1/3, existing on less than $2 a day. We have consumed most of the goods on this planet right now. They're giving you notification that the oxygen, they're saying that the carbon dioxide levels are increasing. The truth is the oxygen levels are come down. So we have to look at all of this thing into perspective. Well, Henry Kissinger and a group of other guys got together and they put together this Plan 2000 that I was privy to. And I put up the summary of all of it up on my website, which is nohoax.com. The Plan 2000, which was, again, 27 years ago, calls for a war to get started in the Middle East in the year 2000. That war is to spread to the United States, is to reduce the world's population down to 500 million, with only 20 million, and that's the Earth's carrying capacity, 20 million Americans that are expected to be left alive. Now, I sat in on the meetings. Now, how are they going to do it? By all means necessary. The best thing to do is follow the biblical prophecies to get the war started, saying Armageddon's going to be in there, and they wrote that book, so it falls in line for that too. Every time I turned around, I found out more lies. In fact, I found out everything's a lie. But I'll go into a little bit more on this, how I came back on this. Now, so we get along with this program somewhat on the extraterrestrial situation. Everybody asks me about that, and I will share what had happened to me. Before I got working with my dad, before I went to Colorado School of Mines, as a matter of fact, when I was 17 years old, I was all set to Colorado School of Mines, and I got in a big fight with my mother, or she fought with me rather. And they said I wasn't going to go anywhere, and they weren't going to let me go in the mines. I was accepted there. So I didn't know what to do. This was at the end of July, back in 1957, to give you an idea. And I looked around at all my buddies were joining the services. I was personally non grata within my family at that point. They were all joining the Navy or something else, and I wasn't considered, I didn't want to do that. So I did go down and apply, and the Air Force put up the money, put me in a hotel, and gave me the food until on my 18th birthday. On my 18th birthday, I was in Lackland Air Force Base. I was down there for about 2.5 weeks. I didn't go through basic like the normal guy, merely because my test scores were really high. When I was in high school, it's kind of like my son. He got 8 college credits in physics when he was a junior in high school. He's a nuclear physicist today. So, some genetic planning within it. Anyway, what happened is that the Air Force then put me through I went to Chanute Air Force Base, and I spent a year in electronics school. My first assignment, I've been working on all these tube-type radios. Remember the old days? Way back. Anyway, I've been working on all this. This is all the training they had given us. They said all the airplanes had all these things, and first thing they did was send me out to Edwards Air Force Base. Edwards Air Force Base is the Air Force Research and Development Center. That's where it's a crossover base. The civilian contractors make these vehicles, they give it to the Air Force to test. It's the first thing I did is get on the flight line. That's what they do. It's grunt work where you take out the black boxes and you put them in, make sure that they work so the pilot has communications. The problem is that all the black boxes that I worked on didn't exist. They had all these, at that time, transistors and diodes and things that we did not even learn in school. I was asking them, I said, where do you get this stuff? And they said, we have think tanks create all these things. Little did I know, at the same time I was there was a man by the name of Colonel Corso. Anybody remember that name?
Yeah.
Colonel Corso was in charge of retro-engineering the alien spacecraft technology into what we had. In other words, the crash disk that occurred in New Mexico, for instance, there was 18 of them. A lot of the disks were in good shape. Anyway, I'm at Edwards probably 2 months. It was a week before Armed Forces Day. I remember this, back at the end of August. When it gets to be over 100 degrees out in the desert, they don't want you to work because of possible heat stroke. So they sent me out to work on the X-15 and just landed. The X-15 is a forerunner of the space shuttle. It has skids. It has 2 wheels up front, but it comes in and it just pops out there in the middle of nowhere. The Muroc, the dry bed. Anyway, I goes out and I did my inspection on the plane, which is nothing more than a rocket. The guy's got to be an idiot to fly it. It's a rocket, that's all it is, with a seat in the middle. However, they gave me a Jeep to run out there, and I had to put 20 miles a day on the Jeep or they'd take it away from me. And I only had about 12 miles on it, so in the north end, there was a couple hangars. I was kind of curious. I already had all the badges on me. I was cleared for top secret. I goes inside this hangar, about the size of this room. And in there, I'm looking at this round silver object. Now, it's as close as you are, 10 feet away. I thought, wow, this is an interesting looking craft. I mean, I've just been working on the F-107. They didn't fly him, but it was a weird bird too, and the B-58, and that type of thing. At that time was really accelerated. So I come back and I asked my commander, I said, when can I work on that round craft? And he says, you saw it? I said, yeah. And he says, well, that's an ion-powered craft, designed by Sikorsky, that's the helicopter people, for use in outer space. I could accept that. I said, when can I work on it? He says, you can't, it's still a civilian project. Well, I then went back to my room, and then I went to my buddy, just happened to be coincidences, right? The base photographer. So I says, hey, get me some pictures of this spacecraft. And he says, George, what did they tell you? And I told him, he says, that's not true. And I'm duh. And he proceeded to show me pictures of the spacecraft along with 2 dead aliens. Now, I did not see the aliens, I saw the spacecraft. And it's not the idea that I didn't consider there may be life in other places. it's the idea is, here it is, I'm being confronted to it, and I was really concerned, why did my commander lie to me? So I'm kind of dumb. I went back down and asked him. First thing he did, he reminded me of my top secret clearance. He's jail time and a fine. We actually joked about that. The fine at that time was $10,000. I said, look, my family's got money there, but I don't know about this jail time bit. I said, I won't do anything. So he basically, we set it down. He said, by the way, next weekend is Armed Forces Day, and because you know what's going on now, I'm going to put you on duty. So I had to go out there. Now, the Air Force is dumb. Edwards Air Force Base is the most incredible base there is with all this super secret thing. They open it up to every civilian can go inside all the super secret things I had just been in, except for this craft, which is about 5 miles north of the base. In other words, the X-15, you're welcome to walk in it. It's like kind of like the space shuttle. You guys all seen the space shuttle on exhibit? You ever go look at it? You know you can't get inside of it with a spacesuit on it? Did you know that? It's all a lie. We never went to the moon. We'll go to the next, that's more later. Okay, now we got to go to the next thing. What happened at that minute? I didn't do anything more. I was immediately transferred off the base. I ended up in Tokyo. When he asked me how to learn a little bit about Japanese, that's what I did. Kudasai. At any rate, I was there for a little while. I decided I had almost 2 years in the service. I wanted out of this crazy outfit. And I contacted Peter Dominic and I said, I want out of this place. I'm going to school of mines. I mean, there's only like 160 people a year get to go to mines. Mine's the #1 earth science school in the world. Dominic ended up going, what they did was they promoted and transferred me down to Biloxi, Mississippi, made an electronics instructor out of me. And then I was only there 30 days after I got to even get my certificate. Then they shipped me off to Illinois again, where I spent the next 2 years in nuclear missiles. So I was in the Hound Dog, I was in the guidance systems on the Hound Dog nuclear missile program. So I got an education on how nuclear works, on how the guidance system works, the capabilities we had at that point, vis-a-vis that. I got out of the service finally. Well, I have to give you a crazy story how that works. The Air Force, I signed up for 4 years. However, because I had 3 of the most critical skills they needed, and we were having a skirmish over in the Middle East, guess who they extended? Watash, me. Because I had over 4 years in, there's a small clause that says I was considered a career airman, and I could get an early out. So I applied and got an early out. I only spent 4 years and 23 days in, and then I went to school of mines, just to give you an idea. So I'm always looking for outs. Anyway, let's go back to the X thing. I told you I was building and doing things all over the country. This is where the fun part comes in. I built Colorado Mountain College up in Leadville, Colorado, 10,000 feet up in the mountains. An inexpensive project. I was invited to city council meeting in Aspen because I could build low-income housing. They needed it in Aspen desperately because the worker bees have to drive 30 miles a day. If you've been to Aspen, you'll know. They have to go down to Basalt and down to Glenwood Springs. So I went in with the city fathers, if you want to. We all had, just like here, we had a city council meeting, and I said, I'll tell you what I'll do for you guys. I'll build the low-income housing for the city of Aspen, and I'll give it to you. You don't have to put up a dime. What I want is the tax write-offs. I mean, I was making so much money, I looked at every dime I could find so I could shelter it. It ended up with everybody approving it except for the city manager. Took me into his office after the meeting over and he says, George, I want you to put $1 million in this account. Sounds just like my dad. I says, you've got to be kidding. I'm giving away to the city, the low-income housing, what you wanted. And I'm giving this all stuff, and you want me to give you personally $1 million for it. I backed out. I said, forget about it. Anyway, I built a house in Aspen, next to Estee Lauder. You all familiar with them? She built it next to mine. Anyway, the housekeeper had this incredible book. I said, I didn't pay attention to this. I'm not playing Monopoly. I mean, at that time I had my own bank. I even had a bank outside the Federal Reserve. Did you know that? Yeah, by the way, are you familiar that the Federal Reserve is a private bank? It has nothing to do with the government. It's like Federal Express, right? Well, I created my own bank too. And I had everything going except for I didn't have that franchise called that, being able to put up 20 times the amount of deposits. They wouldn't let me do that. But I did get away with it. I was licensed in the state of Colorado. I got out of that because you couldn't make any money unless you had that franchise, frankly. All I did was pay my officers, and that was not a good deal. Well, anyway, the house with this incredible book, I'm sitting here looking at it, it's a UFO contact from the Pleiades. I mean, I'm opening up the pictures. This was exactly the same thing I saw at Edwards Air Force Base. Now, this has been 20 years. Why doesn't the world know about this by now? 20 years was enough time to give the government time to come forth with the truth, right? You know, you're talking to a guy that's sitting next to a spacecraft, so I know they're real. And I'm sitting here looking at these pictures. So I decided to fly down to Phoenix, and I talked to this couple, and they say they were investigating a man in Switzerland who claimed to be in contact with beings from the star system, the Pleiades. By the way, his name is Billy Meyer. I said, look, I don't know anything about that. I know those pictures are real. And they said, well, it gave me a little bit more story. He said, the Pleiadians said that they engineered planet Earth for 500 million people. Click, 500 million. I said, well, again, I don't know about that. And I says, what can I do to help you kids? And they said, well, what we need is money. I said, I can arrange that. You tell me what you need to do. And they said, well, we need X amount of dollars. And I said, I'll loan you the money. With the idea is that when you sell the books, I want my money back first. And then it's I'm going back to do my real estate developing. I mean, that's what I'm doing. So I put up the money. 60 days later, Masamenas, the guy's name's Lee. Lee sent me the accounting. I'm sitting here looking at the accounting, but there's no check. I said, Lee, where's my money? And he says, George, we found out who you are, you don't need it. I mean, I'm in an agreement. I said, okay. So I flew my little plane down to Phoenix and filed suit against him. During this 2 months that I've been involved with that material, they were sharing a lot of data with me. It's incredible. I says, I got to find out for myself. So my wife and I jumped on the next plane and we went to Zurich, Switzerland. Rented a little car. It's about a 45-minute ride outside of Zurich. A little town called Hinter Schmidt-Rudy. Hinter behind Schmidt-Rudy. There's some people in here that's been over there. Anyway, I goes knocking on the door, and a young lady answers the door, and she introduced herself as Bruni, and I said, look, I'm George Bruni, and I put the money up for your the publication of your material in the United States. And I said, I also put money into a movie called Contact that's being made. And I says, I've got a lot of questions. And she says, look, we're not talking to Americans, they're all crooks. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they come and take our materials and our stuff like that, and they're supposed to give us a percentage of what they get, and we never get anything. And I said, well, I can understand that. I said, but you go back and tell Billy the buck stops here. I says, if I get these questions answered that I need to know, I says, I'll provide you whatever is necessary so I can assist you guys because the information should be given to the planet. Anyway, she leaves, she's gone maybe 10 minutes. Comes back, she says, Mr. Green, I'm sorry. Shirley MacLaine was here 2 months ago. She promised to help us and nothing. By the way, Lee is the guy's name, his wife's name is Britt, if that helps you. Britt is the secretary for Shirley MacLaine. A lot of collusion. You talk about dark energy, it's unbelievable. How they did keep the stuff, the information. Well, I says, okay, if that's all that's going to be, you're not going to do anything with me. I'm sorry we imposed about your time. I said, I'm going to take off and we're going to go over to Innsbruck. It's late in the afternoon and I realize that I've imposed on your time without anything. I said, where's the closest hotel? And Bruni told us, and I said, we're checking in there and then heading off to Innsbruck. Anyway, next morning at 7 o'clock, we were just getting ready to get up and go down and have breakfast and take off. Knocking on the door is Bruni. She said, Mr. Green, I got a message for you. And I said, what's that? She says, well, we found out who you are. And she handed me a 2-page message which was signed by Quetzal, who happened to be the Pleiadian commander who was in contact with Billy Myers. The information in this document was so astounding because You'd have to be living with me to have some of that. It just blew me away. We were invited back into their so-called compound over there. Now, Billy doesn't have any heat at that time in his house. And anyway, for the next week, they answered all the questions I have, opened up a lot more questions that I had, set up everything. Anyway, I said, look, I'm going to agree, and I made an agreement with the extraterrestrials and Billy at that time, to publish their information that they had to get out to the world. And I put it, whatever was necessary, except for I had a problem. Billy had given away the worldwide rights to his story to Lee. I says, I have no problem about that. We'll fly back, and my attorneys in Beverly Hills happen to be Dern, Mason, and Flown. That's attorneys for the Screen Actors Guild. And if there's anybody can break a contract, they can do it. I says, I'll just notify them. We'll set this thing up so I can go ahead and come to an agreement to publish the information, the extraterrestrials, and what you have to go. Sounds like a good picture to me. You know, I come back and I walked into the office with Dern, and I tell him, I said, this is what I want you to do. And he, first of all, he looks at me like I'm a total nut. I'm making a deal with extraterrestrials. There's no written contract. You know what I told the ETs? You got my word, and if my word's no good, nothing is. All this papers are just the mechanics for the attorneys, at any rate. So anyway, Dern says, I'll take care of it. So a month later, Dern calls me on the office, and he says, come on over. He said, we got it all taken care of. Hold 1 second. We got to change the tape.
Okay.
We have 2 tapes going on. It's a 2 tape. By the way, we're having this video as well as audio tape. Okay. So anyway, I goes back up to Dern's office, and we're sitting there talking. He says, I've got it all taken care of. I want you to fly Billy Meyer over here to the United States. We're going to have a hearing in front of the judge, which would be a normal thing to do. And we'll get rid of the contract that he has with him, and you can go on with his book, this BS deal that you have with extraterrestrials. I said, fine. So from his office, decided to expedite this thing. I called Billy on the phone, and I said, Billy, I want you to fly over here right now, and we're going to set this thing up. I'll send you the ticket. And he says, George, remember I showed you pictures that I had taken of San Francisco totally destroyed on an earthquake? I saw them. He says, I don't know when the event's going to occur. I know it's going to happen. And he says, I'm safe here. I have 3 children. He says, you're going to have to find another way. And my response back to him, he says, I guess the extraterrestrials are going to have to find another way. So when we left Beverly Hills, I had a little Mercedes, little 450 SLs at that time, little 2-seater convertibles. I'm going down the road, and they had one of their beam ships, and I'm going to show you some neat pictures right now. They had one of their beam ships follow us in broad daylight. This is in Southern California, about 100 yards off, to remind me what I was going on it was a real life X-Files. I mean, you have to live through my experience. I mean, it was sitting out there, we kept pointing. I don't know if anybody else saw it, but my wife and I kept looking, and I was playing with it. Because I would take that little SL and run it up to about 120 miles an hour, and it would just, whatever. I thought it was going fast. Then I'd stop, and it just stopped. Well, I'm sitting here, you have to understand, this is I think I was on the 405 freeway. This is unbelievable, we're just playing this thing. Anyway, this lasted for probably a half an hour going down the road. Anyway, after that little escapade, I got involved with some other stuff, and the extraterrestrials we didn't do anything for a while. What I want to show you now is what I had found out. I was so involved with the Billy Meyer story, I said it had to be more truth out there than that. The gentleman that brought Lee together was named Colonel Wendell Stevens. I went down and talked to Colonel Stevens, and he said, look, there's all over the planet. And I said, look, I don't have anything better to do. Let me go down and be a bird dog. I want to go find out for myself. I mean, I got the money to do this. Let's happen. So I ends up in Spain. I was over there with Dr. Antonio Rivera, who's in contact with a group from the planet Umo, called Umites. Heard of those? They look just like us, no vocal cords. They communicate totally telepathically. And they were sharing some technology to cure cancer. They're my buddies. Also, Wendell gave me another job. This is a group of extraterrestrials that are plants. They look just like us, but they're plants. They were seeing if they could live with their chlorophyll in their system. They were seeing if they could live with this symbiotically because of our oxygen content being reduced on the planet. By the way, it's about 14%, I understand. And we get down about 12, we're about gone. That's how close it's coming down to. Well, the group of extraterrestrials in South America, they were sharing the information about cures for cancer. Of course, I was running around with a bunch of people working on the Royal Rife material. Are you all familiar with Rife technology? Yeah. This is using frequency medicine and everything. I've gone a lot, spent a lot of money on that, so I'm really involved with a couple other people now in research. Anyway, these people down there had gave a salve to the mother of this child. And then they put the salve on the palm of their hands. You know how your palm gets warmed up? It was absorbed into the skin. And a couple days later, a scab formed out. You pull the scab off, cancer was all gone. Wouldn't you like to get a sample of that salve? Guess what? I did. I flew a sample of that salve to Chemitox Laboratories in Boulder, Colorado, and for the next 3 days, we did a spectrographic analysis on it. At that time, I was in contact with Dr. Alan Hynek. Remember that guy? Supposedly a government liaison for the extraterrestrial experience. Found out he was CIA. Anyway, I flew down the spectrographic analysis. I still have a copy, by the way. And just from a chemical standpoint, I kept looking at everything. We have a no match, because it's all vibration and things that they've done. So I do have the analysis, but I couldn't do anything with it at that time. Since then, I found out all kinds of things about cures for everything. You can cure everything on this planet, but you don't make money curing things. You only make money treating them. Isn't that right? So at this minute, because what I'm going to do is show you the slide presentation, and I think then we'll see what the time is. Hold on. I got to light it up. Obviously, that's the title of my lecture. The Global 2000 report that I was telling you, this is just kind of a summary. I'll review some of these things at this minute. Calls for planned annihilation of 83%. To wars, starvation, epidemic, disease, environmental sabotage. Environmental sabotage means about all the electronic frequencies that they're doing to us right now. You guys are all being, as you probably know, being bombarded by all kinds of rays. One of the problems with the extraterrestrials is going through this wave of frequency. Remember, every television station is broadcasting frequencies. Every cell phone is broadcasting a frequency. All this is permeating out, and it's affecting each one of us. Dr. Coleman wrote a book. When I first got involved with this, the extraterrestrials brought me to Dr. Coleman. Dr. Coleman was former British intelligence, MI6, still is, frankly. He gets... I sit with him and we have discussion of the current situation on the world from the British side of it. Then I talk with my CIA friends and I get further information from some FBI friends that I have. Anyway, he put together the book which lists the 300 families that control the entire planet. Now there's some copies on my table in the back if you want to look at it, or you can always order them out of my catalog. Everybody that orders one of the books will send you a current list of the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilaterals, and the Bilderbergers, so you can see the interlocking board of directors of the world leaders on how it works. Again, it's answerable to no one. I used to run around with these guys. Remember, they put people into office. As Henry Kissinger says, the absolute aphrodisiac is power. So they give you all the power. They always need a fall guy, so they don't take anything for themselves. Somebody else is always set up there. Are you familiar with the Georgia Guidestones?
No.
Well, look them up on the internet. A guy down in Georgia put up his. And what does it say? They put it in writing. Same thing. Establish a world government, population and reproduction control. I mean, I'm concerned about that. When I was at the population center 2 days ago, we were discussing it. Did you know 65% of the people in the Middle East are under age 25? And 50% of the Americans are over age 50? Just some interesting situations. By the way, that's Billy Meyer. That's the guy in Switzerland we were talking about. These pictures are 20 years old. He's a little bit different has happened. That picture won't come out. His first contact was a girl. Now, I really have to clarify this. Billy has been in contact with extraterrestrials since a child. He was in India. He was with a group over there. He's been kind of a catalyst for the ETs all the way along the line. But anyway, in this particular contact, the girl he was in contact with was Yasi. And the idea if they sent a girl home or along to meet him would be less confrontational. So he went along with that. They wouldn't let her picture to be taken because they walk among us. In fact, I did a meeting like this in California a few months ago, and Spiegel asked me a question, remember with a question and answer deal? And one of the extraterrestrials was in the crowd, and I didn't know it. But I got a letter a couple days later to give me the answer that the people asked me, and I'll share it with you tonight. Billy's has one arm, he lost it in a bus accident. His first camera was one that was an old black and white or little color camera, was a little less than infinity. The focus was not really great. So the first few photographs that he has, like right here, was taken. He was allowed to take friends with him. He went out to fields with the people, and he would literally beam aboard the spacecraft and be gone in front of everybody. Now that space, as we get better, it's just this craft here is so distant. This is the one I saw at Edwards Air Force Base. This is really what brought me into this game, what we're talking about. That's a different variation. There was like 5 variations of spacecraft. That one's over a little town called Wila. The French sent up a Mirage fighter, and it locked on its weapon systems to shoot it out of the sky, but the weapon system seized up. Just so you know, if you want to see all these craft moving, I have a DVD out there you guys can buy for $10. It's about an hour and a half, and you can see and listen to Billy and see all these spacecraft literally moving around trees. It's not high quality because it's second generation, but it's enough so you can see what's going on.
7 meters, or about 21 feet in diameter. Junichi, like our team, had been fascinated by the Meyer photography, yet cautious. He had investigated UFOs around the world and never before seen photographs or movie footage this detailed. It seemed too good to be true. Yet when questions arose, there was always another piece of footage to stir the sense of wonder. Close examination of this footage clearly shows the craft moving behind the large tree. When the size of the beam ship is compared to that of the tree and the farmhouse, it becomes obvious that it would be impossible to suspend it with strings. In addition, the top of this enormous tree is seen to move as the craft passes over it. This movement can be attributed to the backwash of air created by the beam ship. With a full day scheduled, we left the farmhouse early to visit more contact sites.
Quality because it's second generation, but it's enough so you can see what's going on. Now, I'll go see that craft here. This is one that's down at the bottom. In the book of Ezekiel, do you remember how Ezekiel was trying to describe a spacecraft? A wheel within a wheel? Doesn't that kind of look like a wheel within a wheel? There it is. That's exactly what I saw at Edwards. Now what they would do would take their spacecraft and put it next to a tree. See that tree right there? It does not exist. What has happened, there is a certain amount of radiation, and they're very concerned about radiation, that they kept using on this tree. So it leaked into the tree, and rather than cause a potential for you and anybody else, they changed its time. Now, I don't really know what that means, except for the tree's still alive, but it's in another dimension or another time frame. A good friend of mine by the name of Wally Gentleman. Wally Gentleman won the Academy Award for the movie 2001. Remember the Space Obelisk? He's examined all these photographs. And he said, George, anyway, they put these craft next to the tree to act as stabilizers. The equipment that they use, and I'm going to show you something. By the way, I did bring, are all of you familiar with free energy motors and all that kind of stuff? I actually brought one for you to see tonight. I like that. We'll do it later. Anyway, they put the tree or the craft on the other side of the tree so you could see that it wasn't just a model doing it. Now a lot of people claim that that's what's going on. It's not true. And I took some pictures. I even talked to the neighbor when I was over there. He had something going on. I said, "Do you seen anything strange?" And he says, "George, come on out here." And I said, and I went out behind his barn, and there was huge footprints in the mud. The guy was out milking his cow. He said there was a guy 7 meters tall leaning next to the barn. That's 21 feet. I was all wound up. I come running back into Billy. He just shrugged his shoulders, and he showed me the plaster cast of little tiny people. He says, "Don't you know the stories of leprechauns and fairies?" In other words, within this universe, there's all kinds of things going on. Billy that's a movie camera. Billy would put down his movie camera, and he'd start it, and then he'd take his own pictures. That's, for triangulation, it helped. That picture was on the front page of the UFO contact from the Pleiades, but that's an over satellite. Again, these are in Switzerland. Billy still is in contact. He thinks we're a bunch of characters. He's working on with a few people over here. His best definitive history is in a book it's called "And Yet They Fly" or "They Still They Fly." It's in my catalog. If you want to know, it's got pictures, gives you the whole history of Billy. The guy's been with him for 30 years over there that wrote it. And I can't say enough about Billy. He's fudged some of the stuff that he's had, trying to get his story out, trying to get it there. And since that, he's corrected a lot of his information. And I'll tell you that why. Now there's 3 craft. 2 of them are drones. These are basically craft that they use. The extraterrestrials are concerned about the planet now, but as a good scientist, they send out craft to measure soil samples, earth samples, air samples, all kinds of stuff. In fact, out in Franktown, Colorado, some people called me on the phone and said, "George, get out here." So I come out there and see a huge hole dug down in the ground. Went down 35 feet. The top of the dirt it's so hot it just melted like lava. I got samples of it. And I further asked later, and it was just extraterrestrials who were taking soil samples. If you're a good geologist or a good scientist, you want to know what's happening to planet Earth. We're going through a tremendous change on this planet. Again, that's I don't know how many aboard that craft, 5 or more people. Their motherships, if you want to call them that, if they need them, can be huge. How many of you have been out looking at the stars recently, looking at the stars that strobe, red, blue, and green? Stars do not strobe. These are huge spacecraft. This planet Earth is what we call the show that's going on in the universe. What they're trying to do is figure out if we will wake up to change the ending of the story that's being written for us. And that's what it is. Now, this particular shot, as you can see the sun gleaming off the side of the craft. There's one of them where you have the craft on top, a little drone underneath the side, just to give you an idea of how the pictures are done. And, again, it'd be hard to recreate these things. But today you can. Now, here's the fun part. I took some of these pictures. When I was there, Billy was in contact with, again, the extraterrestrials. They have a weapon. Now, in the universe, there's a rule. It says, "Thou shalt not murder thy fellow man in thought or deed." We shorten it down to "thou shalt not kill," but it doesn't cover enough, right? However, if somebody attacks you, you have to protect yourself, right? If you don't, that's suicide or self-murder. That's also against the law. Now, they go into great details about that, and I was kind of fascinated about it because of people that go committing suicide. They don't. All you do is get rid of this body. You got to come right back. Anyway, there's Betty with one arm, and here's this little gun. I call it, the laser gun. That's one of the extraterrestrials. Wouldn't allow her face to be shown, but that's one of her space outfits. But there's the gun again. The detractors didn't like this picture because the end of the gun is about the same color as the fence that Billy just painted, but that's okay too. Again, as you can see, the outfits that they had were space-wide. Now, I have some documents. I'll tell you how fast they travel and what they do, and they say it's pure mechanics, and they give us a lot of information about it. That's what that gun does. Pretty powerful, huh? By the way, I took that picture. I was allowed to take 3 pictures. However, I fudged. The 4th picture I took was on us. They had a limb that was about 30 foot up. And I thought, you know, that's pretty good, Billy. This was straight across, but this limb was up there. I'll get a picture of that. The 4th picture didn't come out. I had a full row with 36 film. And number 21, 22, and 23 are perfect, and 24 is totally blank.
Another universal law.
Yeah, better listen to it. Well, and then my friend, Dr. Jim Deerdorf, he's a professor at the University of Oregon, an astrophysicist. He went over there and he got permission to take pictures, and he did exactly what I did. But on the 4th picture, his camera jammed. This is just to get you involved in understanding you're playing with things that are a lot different. See that? So that's just, all I'm doing is to show you the capabilities they have, and they have many, if you want to call it weapons, but they're all used in defense. Again, they have to follow the same rules. What we put out, we're going to get back at some point. Now they land, they cause, if you look careful at these patterns in the grass, 2 of them are going one way and the other one's going the other way. That led to me saying, well, wait a minute, if it's doing that, then they're setting up some kind of frequency pattern that's totally different. So I'm going to show you some more things, because that's how we put together a little magnetic motor that runs without wires. Now, you've all heard of the crop circles. Crop circles have 2 purposes. One, to make you ponder that there's something else going on this planet. The other thing is the extraterrestrials have been given permission to stabilize the planet. The planet is due to flip on its axis about the year 2012. So the purpose of they have the twofold thing is they are at certain power points throughout the planet, they're in every country, and that is to basically keep us in balance prior to this supposedly flip. Again, hoping that we will wake up and we have the ability to change it. We, all of us, you and everybody that's here. What happens is the grass dies out, see it? Comes back the next year about twice as thick. That's landing, this particular spacecraft, I'm going to show you real close-ups in a second. It lands, the power just melted all the snow. This is, again, in the back, or the front yard of Billy's house. That's Billy's house in the background. He has Dobermans and also peacocks, because they make a lot of noise to keep all the strangers away. These pictures you will not see. I got these abilities. I figured they were the most important pictures on the whole thing that he had over there. The ability for the spacecraft to go between here and other planets is they basically convert all matter to light. Remember talking about going to the light? Well, take a look at this. You're taking a look at a light, you're looking at a spacecraft that is not quite physical. You see it start to form? See it again? Incredible? That's what you are, a hologram of condensed light. That's Billy in the middle of this energy stream they put around it to give you an idea. Again, Billy's house. I want one of these. In fact, I told him, I said, I want to write for this. Now, a couple things that I found that was interesting about this. There we go. See right there? There's a gap in there. Now, that was kind of strange to me, except I started figuring out, by using some of the information I had, they're setting up a field using magnetics. See this? So what we did is we created a magnetic field, basically a horseshoe magnet. All the poles, north side and all on the south side, but we left the gap, like this here. And that's what I'm going to show you in a little while. By doing that, we created a continuous motion of magnetism that is always out of balance. So it's always looking to cause some kind of motion to happen. Does that make sense to you? Well, we did it. Again, there's a spacecraft Titan. And remember, well, you can't see them right now because it's not bright enough in here. We'll go to the next one up. Remember those, see the little tiny protuberances underneath there? That's what melted it down at the bottom. Again, they call this the wedding cake, by the way. This is the latest variation. This is a bigger crap. Now that's, as you know, the old Volkswagen bus and the little trailer behind it. Same, basically another picture of the same thing. I'm going to show you some crop circles. There's one of them. There's all different kinds of sizes and shapes. I've got literally hundreds of them. There's videos and there are books on all of them, and they all have, you know, their ideas that their communication. And again, the extraterrestrials assured me, they says, you guys don't worry about it right now. Just be happy that we're doing it to stabilize it. Each of these have certain patterns that are happening all over the globe. I mean, they were up in Montana, of all places, out in California a couple weeks ago. India, if you saw the movie Signs, that was done over in India. They're in Russia. Literally beautiful things. There's, I got the latest copy of Nexus that has like 10 pages of it. I don't know if you guys subscribe to Nexus magazine, but you know, contact us and we'll get you information on it. They keep track of a lot of those things that are going on. There's one in front of an apartment. I have some friends that went to England, by the way, and camped out in the field, woke up in the morning, and crop circle was totally around them. I haven't put it onto this, but probably my next lecture I'll have it. I have a sequence where I'm going to show you the crop circles being made.
There are footage showing small white spheres hovering over the fields where the crop circles have appeared. In the documents showing these objects, there is one that has caused a stir-up. In it, one can see some spheres flying over a wheat field, and in a few seconds, a pictogram appearing similar to a snow crystal. The footage was recorded at 5 a.m. of 11th of August 1996 by John Wadley, an English UFO enthusiast of the crop circles phenomenon in proximity of Oliver Castle in England.
This is amazing.
Numerous controversies have been raised concerning the authenticity of the footage. However, the accurate analysis carried out by the American researcher Jim Dilettoso, an expert of computerized systems of videos, have not ascertained any trace of falsification.
My opinion on the Oliver's Castle video footage is that there is no evidence of a hoax. The key thing is that if the Oliver's Castle image was made digitally, that word digital says it went into a computer. In the vertical interval signal of the copy that we have, there is no evidence that it was ever digital format.
One can see some spheres flying over a wheat field, and in a few seconds, a pictogram appearing similar to a snow crystal. The footage was recorded at 5 a.m. of 11th of August 1996 by John Wabley, an English UFO enthusiast of the crop circles phenomenon in proximity of Oliver Castle in England.
It's amazing.
Obviously, the handbook is where most of you people should have it. I'm sorry you don't have it. The ones are going to do it. This handbook came about because 4.5 years ago I was in Las Vegas. I got a divorce from my wife because we got attacked by everybody. Somebody wants to know about what's going on, how to divide people. I kept bringing my wife in and have her go through depositions, and that was an emotional thing that she just couldn't take, and it was smarter that we just departed and got away from the fire that I was taking. Because I really step on a lot of toes. Anyway, 4.5 years ago, when I was in Las Vegas, the extraterrestrials contacted me again and said, "George, you're going to remind you of your agreement to publish the information. You're running out of time." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "We want you away from Las Vegas. The energies here are out of balance. We want to make sure we have a pure information that's going through." Now, when I was with Billy over in Switzerland, one of the things that confused me, the Pleiadians said that they were in continuous contact with spirit. Now remember, these Pleiadians, the girl, Semjase, appeared to be about 30 years old, but she was 300 years old. They lived to be 1,000. They claim that we're their descendants, that we were created as their warriors, most of us. These are some skulls that are in Peru, at the Peruvian Museum. If you look back at history, remember Nefertiti with the long... Okay. Been a lot of interaction with extraterrestrials throughout this whole planet. The United States has all kinds of information. There's a lot of burial grounds of 10 and 12 foot people. How about that? You guys remember about the little grays? Again, when Billy, when I was over there, he just showed me these little, he said 12-inch tall people, 14 inches. Oh, like I say, leprechauns and fairies. Well, within the universe with gravity, we have all kinds of things. Or within the creation, look that way. That's just another skull. Now these are on display, by the way, in the Peruvian museums right now. A lot of people have examined them. There's a lot of extraterrestrials. You've heard about the plains of Nazca down in Peru. There's a lot of remains of a lot of extraterrestrials that are around there. They're still visiting. I actually have a friend in New Mexico that has a ranch out a little west of Taos, and they sit in the hot springs watching the spacecraft grow into the mountain. How's that for a bunch? Now, probably the next thing is going to be the most controversial of all things. I got to go back to where I was at and what's happened to me. When I was 14 years old, a friend of the family, got all these friends of the family, by the name of Dr. Walter Moyer, he was on the team of doctors that dug up the Dead Sea Scrolls. There was this group of doctors there at the Denver Museum of Natural History, and they were his friends. Anyway, he invited me to go over to the Middle East and help dig up things with him, and my mother wouldn't let me go. I guess that's one of the reasons why I travel around the world right now. If I can't do it, I'm going to go do it, you know. Anyway, Moyer come back and he says, when I'm 14, he says, you know the story they tell you about, you know, the crucifixion of Jesus and all that? And I said, yeah. And he says, it's a lie. And I said, what? Can't be. He said, yeah. He said, I'll tell you about that. He says, at that time they were crucifying everybody. And everybody didn't die. And he said, but they didn't know what to do with him. By the way, his name wasn't Jesus, it was, and I'll show you in a few minutes. Jesus was a nickname given to him by Saul of Tarsus, who changed his name to Paul, who was responsible for most of the New Testament, just so you know. Anyway, when I was with Billy, Billy handed me this document called the Talmud, or the Teachings of Emmanuel. Emmanuel. Interesting? Now, I took 4 different Bibles that you can go to any Bible bookstore and see exactly what we're talking about. The 4 Bibles that are most common are, well, Geneva's the old one. That's where the King James was taken away from. By the way, King James, let me ask you a question. Is anybody in here accept a Bible that was authorized by Bill Clinton? Would you accept a Bible that was authorized by Bill Clinton?
No.
Did you know our presidents, none of them take the King James Bible? They get the Thomas Jefferson Bible. Now, who's Thomas Jefferson but a Mason? Illuminati. But anyway, I decided to go look and see what's going on. George Lamsa now, he said, I'm going to do my translations, and he went directly from the Aramaic into English. By the way, what did he say? The name Jesus, look at it, every one of them. And I like the New Living Bible. What does it say? So which one's right? You understand what the problem is when you're doing translations? Here, this is any Bible bookstore, so if you have some confusion, doesn't that look there? It's kind of interesting since Saul of Tarsus gave him the nickname Jesus. So I was more concerned about the story of Emmanuel. And what happened is I came back with the documents. My wife worked on it for 2 years. We shared the information with Dr. Jim Deerdorf, that professor at the University of Oregon, who was quote, born again. He said, I'm going to disprove the documents. He ended up proving that they were real. These were written by Judas Iscariot, the scribe to Christ. In it, he's trying to put out the real message that he was given at that time, not the one that's been passed on to what you think. And I'll be talking about a few of those in a minute. This is to give you some differences in the translations. And I used the King James, or Jim did, the Matthew 5 up there, and look at how the Talmud translated it. And the next one, I thought this was pretty neat. Does that speak of flying saucers? For the ones in the back of the room, I'll read the Talmud. It says, when Emmanuel had been baptized, he soon came out of the water of Jordan, and behold, a metallic light dropped from the sky and descended steeply over Jordan. It turns out that Emmanuel's father was an extraterrestrial Pleiadian who impregnated Mary. His purpose was to bring back the spiritual teachings of man, to wake up to who and what we really are, a spirit having a physical experience. Here's the Talmud's translation of a 2-line in Matthew. It says, he rose and took a child, and they departed to Egypt. You all remember that story. Anyway, in the Talmud it says, Joseph rose and took the young child, his mother, and escaped of celestial son Gabriel. Does it make sense? The logic of this is incredible. And what they told us, the extraterrestrials have given me the information, they said the first rule in this universe, gain all knowledge. You can't do it in one lifetime. The wheel of reincarnation is a fact. The trouble is we come into this dimension and we forget who and what we are. Anyway, the Talmud said that's Emmanuel, a prophet who brings teachings of wisdom. He's trying to wake you up. Remember what Christ said? What I do, you can do, and even greater. Also said, what you sow, you shall reap. True. That's the book, the Talmud. It's been out of print for about 4 months. I have orders on it. They keep promising me delivery. It may come in the next 3 weeks, as they're telling me, so you can have it. What I call the authorized, agreed version by Billy. Billy and I have a little bit of problem about this. I don't know how you can copyright documents that were 2,000 years ago.
Unless you were there.
Well, he even didn't have copyright, let's put it that way. Well, when we come back, the argument was that we, in order to print the book, we had to do his translation, the Schweizer Deutsch or High German, on one page and then do the English on the other, so that's where you get it. The next thing I'm going to show you, these are what we call monolithic domes. Now, as a builder, I spent an afternoon with a guy by the name of Bucky Fuller. Remember him? Also called Buckminster Fuller. Bucky and I were arguing about we argued. I told him his geodesic was a piece of junk. And the reason is, as a builder, the worst place that I have in building any kind of project is the seams. Remember? You go look at these beautiful windows over here. Where the seams are is where your leakage is. And that's the hardest thing to seal up. So anyway, I told Bucky we have to do a one-form flow. And a couple of guys and a bunch of potato growers up in Idaho, David South, were building underground potato storage when the foam started coming out. Remember all the foam stuff? And they decided they're going to start building houses of them, and they got these balloon material. They blow up a balloon. Now, I'm one of these people to find out for sure, so you're going to see. I went down there, and I built one. Actually, I built 4 of them since then. This is the only dwelling that will probably withstand what's coming up. From the extraterrestrial position, they're saying because of what we're changing, and I'm going to explain a little bit of this in a few minutes, the atmosphere, that didn't come out very well. That's inside the dome looking up. That's me. As you can see, we just got to finish spraying the equipment. You hold the window in place and then you spray the foam and the concrete around it. That's a little pump. It's called a Targhee pump. It's a little concrete pump. Now, any of you guys can build them. It's a 9 parts concrete to 1 of sand. It comes out and it sets up with the reinforced steel about 2,000 psi. It'll withstand winds of 400 to 500 miles an hour. There's nothing that I built prior to these domes that will do that. I mean, I got some. You go down to Phoenix right now on Central Avenue. I built an upside-down pyramid. It won't, and it's all steel. You know, but it won't make it. They're making, these are office buildings, they're making churches out of them, that's inside of a school. They're the only dome, actually in Florida when we just had all this stuff, the only dwellings that withstood all the winds were the domes. In, I think it's North Carolina, they have a place called Eye of the Storm. It was a direct hit of the hurricane. You're all familiar with what's going on from that up to a point. This is just to give you an idea. Now the guys have become really sophisticated and creative as far as doing interior design. And I really like some of it now. That's the reinforced steel. I've been talking with steel people about changing the patterns on that to make a little bit more sense so we can have the energy conference and also set up a bunch of pyramids, diamonds, in order to keep the energy. By the way, these units, because of the steel and the configuration, keeps out all the outside bombardment. You talk about doing meditation. Wow. There's a friend, I was with him last Friday. I brought him down, taught him how to do all that. He's living out there, by the way, about a mile and a half from Mark Bell. Again, these are just some huge buildings. They build them as, people are building them as hotels and places too, so they're just everywhere. Okay, with that, let's turn the lights back on. I'll get it later. Okay, now I'm going to share with you a little bit else of what I found, what we're doing to ourselves. We are doing everything to ourselves. Remember the old law, what you put out, you're